This interview is one I've been looking forward to because as I've been getting around the world and talking to startups and big companies, they've been mentioning your services a lot more. So first of all, where are we?
Okay, we're at Amazon headquarters in Seattle.
Yeah. Beautiful building, by the way. It's an old hospital, it looks like.
This is really cool, really fun place to work.
And who are you?
So my name is Jeff Barr, and I'm the Senior Web Services Evangelist.
And it's surprising. So I meet startups like Mogulus and Justin TV, all sorts of different startups, and they keep talking about, oh yeah, we're an Amazon S3 company. You know, in fact, Mogulus went even further. They said we don't own a server at all, right? And so I know that what you guys are doing is dramatically changing how businesses are built and how they're dealing with their infrastructure. But could you tell me a little bit about what Amazon S3, what Amazon Web Services are?
Sure. Okay, so what we've been doing for the last 5+ years at Amazon is really opening up our infrastructure and making it available to software developers, and really inviting developers to take that infrastructure and build businesses and applications around it. So different components of the web services model include Amazon S3, which is storage in the cloud, EC2, which is computing in the cloud. Our newest service is called SimpleDB, structured data storage in the cloud, and then the SimpleQ service is messaging, once again, in the cloud. So you take all these pieces and you put them together, and we give developers a very powerful set of tools that they can pay for by the hour or by the byte, whichever is the appropriate measurement unit for these services. And instead of having to go out and buy a lot of their own infrastructure, they can simply use ours and pay for exactly what they need. They don't have to anticipate ahead of time, do I need many servers or a few servers, and then scale up to meet demand that might or might not be there. They can really build their application to scale, and then when that traffic comes in, if they've architected their app just right, the number of servers and storage will just ramp up. But if the traffic goes way up because they're on your blog or they're on TechCrunch or someplace like that, the application will scale up, use more processors, everything's great. Traffic goes away when they turn to look at some new bright and shiny thing. Their costs and their usage will go down commensurately. So great new model for developers.
Where did this come from? 'Cause, you know, when I think of the world of web services, particularly infrastructure web services, which is what these are, I think of companies like Microsoft or Google or IBM. I don't think of Amazon, because Amazon in my head is like a store. You know, it's where I go to buy books and where I go to buy cool things. It's not where I thought that I would be putting my business's infrastructure. Who started this group and where did it come from?
So great question. So what I found after I started working here, just days after I started working here, and this is way back in mid-2002, there's a really deep technological backbone to this company. People don't always think of Amazon as a, quote, technology company, but what I found inside here is that there's a bunch of people very passionate about technology, about taking hardware and software and just wringing every last bit of performance and quality out of it. And so that gave us our real technical core. And what we found after we released our first web service, and this is again going way back to 2002, is that we saw developers were a great customer base for us. We put that first service out, we gave developers access to the product catalog, and within a couple of days after we did that, we saw this outpouring of energy and creativity and innovation, where they took what we gave them and they built really interesting and useful kinds of things with it. And right away we said, developers could be a really interesting market for us. What other things can we do for them? What other of their needs can we meet? And we've been really, since then, really been looking to just solve developers' problems for them so they can really be a bit more focused on their app and less focused on essentially the commodity style infrastructure.
I've written on my blog a couple times that I'm completely shocked that the bigger companies have left you guys alone in this space for the most part. and that they've let you build this set of services that companies really depend on now for their infrastructure. Is it shocking to you guys that you haven't seen more competition come in from, let's say, Microsoft or Google or some of the bigger companies?
Well, undoubtedly I think we'll have some at some point, but I think we have some pretty unique things that we really help us to do what we do here well. And also, when I think back to the initial customers of Amazon.com 10, 11 years ago, the folks that bought their first Perl book or their first How to Program an HTML book, they bought those from us. They kind of grew their skills based on what they bought from us. And as they did that, they probably gained some respect for who's Amazon and how hard it is to do the kinds of things that we do. And what I'm actually finding, and this was actually a surprise to me as well, those same folks that were our early adopter retail customers 10, 11 years ago, they're the same ones that now look at web services and say, this stuff is great, you've actually educated me through your books to the fact that I can now understand and respect how difficult it is to do these things. And because I've been a retail customer for so long, I'm going to actually trust you guys to do these same things for me as a developer that you did for me as a customer.
Tell me a little bit about your data center. Have you ever been in there?
I've never seen it. I have no clue where they are. They're carefully protected, and we use all the expertise we've gained since the beginning of the company to figure out how do you build these things very reliably, very securely. We keep them, of course, tightly locked down, and I couldn't tell you where they were if my life depended on it.
Yeah, that's always fascinating to me. I got a tour of a Google data center without Google's knowledge, of course, and it was fascinating, right? But these are huge buildings with huge amounts of computing power and hard drives and all that. And I always find it fascinating when employees who work on these services don't even get access to them.
So this is a really interesting thing as we go and talk to corporations, is that the actual physical data center is a point of pride for a lot of corporations. So there's always some person inside the organization whose job is basically build this vast data center, and it's something you can take any visitor into a data center and take them into this nice air-conditioned room and say, look at my vast empire. And as we move into cloud computing, they don't necessarily have anything they can show them as an equivalent. They can say, look at my little Amazon bill for my services I use, but it's not usually as impressive as an air-conditioned data center. I've joked actually with some of the folks here that we should actually build these kind of false front data centers that are just a bunch of spinning tapes and blinking lights and just show people, here's my data center. But if you turn it around, it just says Amazon inside.
Well, you got to put a couple webcams inside your own data center, and then they can put those images up on the wall or something.
I don't think there's too many cameras in our data centers.
Probably not. You don't want Google to get any ideas of how to make their data center better. Tell me a little bit about how your customers are using it. What's the most surprising thing you've seen done with your web services? And give me a sense of the family. Well, most of the geeks who are watching this know what you guys do. They know where to find your web services. But Fast Company magazine brings a different kind of audience, a more business audience. Give me a sense of what companies are doing with your web services.
Okay, so I see a whole range of things, from the very, very straightforward kinds of things like file storage and backup and software downloads. For example, Linden Lab downloads the Second Life client, comes through Amazon S3. Now, the first generation web service apps generally would use a single service. They'd use computing, or they would use storage, or maybe they'd use queuing. The second generation, we're really seeing that people really understand this cloud computing model, and they say, if I have storage and computing and database, and I put them all together, what kind of applications can I build out of that? So one example I've been talking about lately is a company called Sonia Networks. So what they do is they do corporate email backup. So you install their client application. The application then actually downloads all of your corporate email to the Amazon cloud. It then stores it, indexes it. If you're in a company and somebody says, what did we say about this particular subject 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they've got it all indexed and they can actually retrieve it on demand. So if you've ever been in a situation where somebody wants to sue you based on something you said 3 or 4 years ago, these guys support what's called email discovery, where you can actually go and you can recover those kinds of things. So the classic model that all their competitors had was they would build some kind of a hardware device. They'd take that hardware device, they'd roll it into your data center, it would start spooling away, back up email, and of course it was always under configured and under provisioned, and it would become full. And so that was a very awkward situation because they'd have to upgrade, they'd have to invest a lot of money in big chunks. When you buy hardware, you're never just smoothly and linearly increasing your costs. You just got these big step function cost increases. So with their solution, you simply pay as you go for exactly what you're using. They never have to worry about, did we fill up the email appliance? Do we suddenly lose the ability to archive? So what they told me is it's really interesting. They're using a whole array of different services. They're using storage, they're using computing, they're even using our flexible payment service. And they have one outside monitoring server to make sure everything's running. Everything else that they process is actually in the cloud. So they're very, very close to a fully virtual company where they don't own any assets. And I think that minimal level of assets model is definitely something that we're seeing on a pretty regular basis.
How closely is Jeff Bezos involved in this group?
He's really, really involved. From my understanding is he participates in design decisions. He's got his personal fingerprints on this is what I like, this is how we need to change. He's got a really good sense, I think, of what developers need and the kind of things it's going to take to help them solve more problems.
Tell me a little bit more about the team, because we haven't, the outside world doesn't get to visit Amazon headquarters and go upstairs and see the team. Tell me a little bit about what kind of people work on there. How big is the team?
Oh, let's see. Great.
It sounded like, when you just look at your services on the screen, it's hard to get a sense of how good the team is or how big it is.
We have a totally awesome team, and it's actually fairly difficult to delineate exactly where the team ends and where the rest of Amazon picks up, because in a really actual sense, a lot of people in very, very different parts of the Amazon technology team contribute either directly or indirectly to the web services effort. So I can't say every last person that is a developer at Amazon contributes to web services, but at the same time, the folks that are building data centers, that are building basic monitoring tools and figuring out how we operate our servers really efficiently, every one of those pieces of expertise goes not just to Amazon.com, but to the whole web services product line. So it's not a nice, neat thing where you can kind of go to one point in the hierarchy and say, okay, how many people are below this point in the hierarchy? That's the effort.
I imagine if I was a Wall Street analyst, I'd be asking, what the hell are you guys doing? It doesn't seem like it's your core business or something like that. How has it started actually contributing to Amazon's bottom line yet? And how, if so, how?
So this is a really early stage business for us, and we do find that these early stage businesses, we invest for a while. We invest for 5 or 7 years before they turn into really, really gigantic businesses. Everything that I see shows that we're really heading in the right direction, and that we really see that we will, over time, we'll have 3 product lines. We'll have the retail customers, we'll have the merchants and sellers, and we'll have developers as our 3rd customer base. And we're heading very nicely in that direction.
I can tell you you're heading more than nicely in that direction, because every startup I'm talking to, and even bigger companies, are starting to talk about your services. So it's got to start contributing at some point. I don't think Wall Street's seen that yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when you guys actually start showing bottom line results. Tell me, do you guys have, does the accountant upstairs come over and say, what the hell are you buying all these hard drives for?
Not as far as I know, but there's enough going on that I don't know everything that happens here anymore. But this is a company driven by metrics, and so if we're buying more hard drives, it's because we can actually show them a graph that shows this is how much we've used and this is how much we've made from it, and this is why we need more.
Tell me, if you were meeting with a developer right now, what would you be showing them?
As far as which services? Or
yeah, what would you be bragging about or saying, hey, check this out?
Well, one of our newest services is called Amazon SimpleDB, which is a very scalable, highly available database in the cloud. And so databases and structured storage was one of those real question marks for a lot of developers for quite a while. And we looked at a lot of different ways to do data storage in the cloud, and we looked at, does it make a lot of sense to take a traditional relational database and run that in the cloud? There's some scenarios where that makes sense, but we found that a lot of developers, especially the smaller ones, didn't want to have a database administrator on staff. They didn't want to have to deal with explicit replication. They didn't want to have to deal with, what if the hard drive fills up? How do I scale to a second? How do I get the same database code running on more than one machine? So the Amazon SimpleDB really just obviates the need to worry about a lot of those things. You simply throw data at it. It automatically indexes it. It stores it in multiple locations. It makes it very highly available. You don't have to worry about backups because it's got multiple copies in there. And that just takes a lot of load off the developer's mind. They can, once again, it's the same basic message. Use these services. They're clean, they're straightforward. The APIs are as simple as we can make them. but it's going to take a whole load off you, and really you can just focus on your application instead of on these just nuts and bolts details that are already solved problems for you.
How many data centers is the Amazon Web Services on? If there was a huge earthquake in Seattle and one of your data centers went away, is my data safe? Would it still be available? Tell me a little bit about how redundant your information is if I bet my company on Amazon.
So the interesting answer to how many do we have is always enough. That sounds a little bit glib, but it's the honest truth, because there's actually a lot of dynamic information that goes into, for example, how many copies of your data do we have? Well, we actually can track how reliable are the hard drives, and we can actually adjust the replication factor accordingly. Now, there's multiple sets of data centers in a couple different locations around the US. There's a set of data centers on the East Coast, another set on the West Coast, and there's another set in the UK as well. So you put those all together, and there's a high degree of reliability and redundancy in the system.
And do you have a sense of how good the reliability is worldwide, so that a customer in India has the same experience as one in San Francisco, let's say?
So there's a couple things that are going to come into play there. One is that there's a lot of internet between here and there, and also the further away that we're going to be from them, there's going to be a little bit more latency from their client to our servers. We've done a little bit to address that. Actually a lot, I really should say. We took advantage of some advanced features of the TCP/IP protocol, implemented something called TCP window scaling, which actually, if you have very, very long connections and you're moving lots and lots of data across them, we can actually set it up so there's more data flowing back and forth across the wire at any given time. And we put this into beta testing in January, and people reported up to an 18 times speed up for these very, very long connections. So we try to listen to developers just all over the world and say, what are your concerns? How can we make these things better for you?
How do you talk to developers? Do you have a forum, or do you have events here at the Amazon headquarters where they come in and talk with you guys? How do you hear what new ideas people want to see from you guys?
That's a great question, because I often say that my job is supposedly to go out and talk, but really my job is also to go out and listen. So on every one of my evangelism trips that myself or my team does, we go out, we go to some conferences, we go to some user groups, but we then also do a whole bunch of one-on-one meetings with developers. And we go there, we introduce ourselves, maybe we present. When we just pull open the laptop or our pad of paper and we start writing down everything that they have to say. We also have a very active set of developer forums. We listen there. We do bring in some of our kind of representative customers into a group we call the Developer Advisory Council. We'll bring them here once a year and kind of open up a bit and tell them what we're planning. And I also actually run developer chats in Second Life. And I did one this morning, and I specifically said, all I want to hear is ideas and suggestions. And for over an hour, I had 16 people just typing as fast as they could with ideas and suggestions and comments. And that's just invaluable, that unvarnished, direct, this is what I want kind of feedback. So we do our best to really take that and then to spread it around the company to all the right places to make sure that it is actually heard. And you then, of course, the challenge is you can't do everything everybody asks for. You need to figure out which few things can we actually do that are going to help the most number of developers.
Do all the services have a terms of service, and do you guarantee uptime, or do you guarantee that you won't change the API and mess up somebody's code or anything like that?
Okay, that's a great question. So we do a lot based on what our customers ask us for. So for example, with S3, we do have a service level agreement that guarantees a certain level of availability of their data, and then has penalties for us if we don't meet that SLA. For other services, we're really still kind of seeking customer input to say, what exactly do you want us to measure, and what do you want us to guarantee in the SLA?
And I'm trying to think what else to ask. From a developer standpoint, how easy is it to implement one of your services? I've seen some of the code that like Don McCaskill's showing me and stuff. A couple of lines of code sometimes to implement like a database, right? Tell me a little bit about how simple you've made it for developers to use.
So the simple part of the name of many of our services refers to the fact that we tried to have extremely clean conceptual models for these services so that developers could read the documentation, they could really get their head around the model and the APIs as quickly as possible, because we want them to go directly from I have a great idea to here's something up and running with just as little friction in between point A and point B as possible. To that end, we have documentation, we have a lot of code samples, we also recognize a lot of community code samples, we have developers out in the community that build articles and samples, we do our best to bring those in. And if you do a code search, you can go out to things like Krugel, we have a partnership with Krugel, and they actually do a code search against all of our samples. So if you're looking for how to use a particular API, you can actually just search through that, and it'll search through all of our samples, all the third-party samples, and give you some great results right then and there. So developers will happily read docs, but they're often a lot happier to say, just show me some code that makes that happen.
I imagine if I was upstairs talking with the team, that at some point in the last couple of years, they realized that they had a huge impact on how business is being done. Did they know that they would have that impact from the beginning? And when was the day when you guys sat down and go, geez, we just did something pretty dramatic?
I think that's actually continuous. That's just happening on a very regular basis, where each time we see another article, another blog post, just all different kinds of feedback, another success story, I think it just happens again and again and again, where we say, this is something pretty special here. And to me, it's been a real privilege to be part of this effort and to do what I can to help it succeed. It's just not that often that you see essentially a new web platform come into being and you say, I can actually have something to do with this actually succeeding.
Before the camera turned on, one of the stereotypes maybe of these web services is that they're only for startups. But we were talking about some big companies that are using them. Many can't share their names, but do you have any examples yet that you can share about how a bigger company is using your service?
Sure. So one that I really like a lot is New York Times, and they did this really cool project a couple months ago where they were, as part of their process of opening up their archives, they took about 4 terabytes of image data, and using EC2, they processed that into 11 million finished documents. And one developer sitting at his desk actually spawned 100 EC2 instances, ran them for 24 hours, did that complete processing job, and it cost him a whopping $240 for that whole process. So you think of the typical situation if you're a developer in a big organization, it's real hard just to get an upgraded PC on your desk, much less get 100 machines for 24 hours. So it really it changes the way developers think about how they can solve problems. You don't really get this excuse anymore of, I could have done something amazing, but I just didn't have the hardware around to do it. You have to, if you think like that, then you're going to be the last generation of developers, not the next generation of developers.
Even if you had the money, even if you were Bill Gates, you could buy a data center, but it takes time to implement a data center. Now you just turn on your computer and go to Amazon services, set up a service, code a couple of lines of code, and boom, you have something going, right? Can you iterate the various services, like S3, I know, but what are the list of services that you guys provide? Okay,
let's see. Let's hope I don't forget any. We have so many. So in the infrastructure side, we have S3 for storage. We have the Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2, for processing. We have the Simple Queue Service, or SQS, for messaging between parts of a scalable application. We have the Simple Database, or STB, for structured data storage. We've got flexible payment service for processing money. Now, layered above those other services, we have something called DevPay, or developer payments, which allows a developer to put their own business model around the other services. So, for example, you can put your own application into EC2, and you can then set your own price to buy the application, to run it by the month, and to run it by the hour. And we will then take care of all the nitty-gritty details of allowing the customer to choose that from a catalog and pay for it and run it and bill it. So we'll take care of all the billing, and we'll just take our cut and then pass the rest on to the creator of that application.
Does Amazon use these services itself to run its own business?
We do. There's quite a few internal applications for each and every one of these different services.
So you probably have some new services coming out that you guys are testing internally?
I don't talk at all about the future. I find that
I tried.
Well, the safest thing for me to do is I actually maintain a very limited awareness personally of what's coming up, only because if I knew how cool these new things were, I would be way too tempted to talk about them. So the way to be really safe is simply be somewhat aware, but just know none of the details until they're actually ready to roll. And that way I can be thinking about them, think about how I want to talk about them, how I want to blog about them, but kind of keep the specifics under wraps until...
Anything else you want a business audience to know about Amazon's web service?
Well, we do see that a lot of people are using this whole cloud computing concept right now. There's a few folks that are really, really into it, and they totally get it, and they're zooming ahead. There's some folks that are investigating, but it's not going to be too long before this is the mainstream way to do business. And this is the time to actually investigate and to start your pilot projects and start making sure that you have the experience and the skills and the way and an appreciation for just the way this can change the way your business runs.
Anything else you want to tell me about Amazon?
It's a cool place to work. We're always hiring.
Very cool. Thank you so much for coming in. Great.